Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.
The National Weather Service.
And good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, here with you on the 21st of June. We're now past the summer solstice, and we're not going to talk anymore about the decreasing hours of daylight or anything wishy-washy about winter just yet. Enjoy your summer and what's left of it. Of course, there's plenty left, and it is going to be a good one. Here's a look at the website. Of course, as always, we like to remind you to go to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. But remember, on July 6th, there's going to be some big changes with all of the websites across the Alaska Region's National Weather Service online. So make sure you check that out, and you can do that by going to w2.weather.gov/ try Anchorage, for example, AFC/AJK for Juneau /AFG for Fairbanks, or any of the other sites that we offer in the Alaska region. If you just change those little bits there, you can try them out, try and break it, see what works, find what you like, and then tell us if it's really hard to get there or just get used to using it in that way. We think you'll find some of the features really helpful with time. And on July 6th, those will switch over to our normal websites like weather.gov/Alaska or weather.gov/Anchorage or Juneau or Fairbanks or however you like to get there. The weather info line's not changing. Use that as always, 800-472-0391, and find us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Fire danger, fire danger, fire danger. It is that time of the year, but it is not as rough and tumble as it was this time last year. You surely remember the Sockeye Fire, and previous to that, the Card Street Fire, and previous to that, down around the Kenai Peninsula. Quite a bit of activity around those areas. We are still watching fires across the south and the west. Those are not going quite as strong as they have been in previous weeks, and the attention right now is really on some parts of the lower 48 contiguous states there around California and Arizona. So we seem to be doing okay. Let's knock on some wood for that for just a few minutes or so. But high fire danger continues up around the Alcan border and into the upper Yukon Valley, parts of the middle Tanana Valley, parts of the Susitna Valley and the Copper River Basin, as well as the interior of the Seward Peninsula and northern sections of Southeast for the time being. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture, and as always, my favorite here, you can see low pressure working its way from northwest to southeast across the outer coast of southeastern Alaska. Behind that, a lot of drying taking place, a lot of sunshine over Kodiak Island today. What a beautiful day for you. Most of the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet saw just a gem of a day, including areas around Prince William Sound. Northward, a few more clouds north of the Alaska Range, and you can see some of those bubbling up with the heat of the day. Some showers, even a few lightning strikes up across the middle Yukon Valley up toward the Brooks Range. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but there's a big chunk of cold air dropping southward across the North Slope. In fact, cold enough for snow across some parts of the northeastern Brooks Range. As we get in through the remainder of the day, there's still a chance for about an inch or so below 4,000 feet in the northeastern Brooks Range, as well as areas above that looking at as much as 5 inches. 5 inches of snow above 4,000 feet. I might need some more coffee for this afternoon. Low pressure south and west of Adak is clearly visible on the visible satellite picture here. You can see the frontal boundary wrapping in here, and as that moves ahead in time on our infrared scan, you can see how quickly it's moving that moisture northward towards St. Matthew and the southwestern coast, but there's a lot of dry air coming in behind. The overall circulation isn't moving very much, and as such, it's going to kind of stir itself up into a very well mixed situation without a whole lot of forward push of that cooler or wetter air. A lot of this is just going to sit here and hover across the Aleutians and slowly work its way from west to east. So by Thursday and Friday, we'll see this kind of a little bit more over Kodiak Island and the west coast. In the meantime, that's allowing colder air to drop southward, and we'll probably see a better chance for a few more showers and thunderstorms across the upper Yukon and eventually into more of the Canadian part of the continent here as we go into the rest of the weekend. Here's a look at the surface map. Low pressure here sitting west of Sitka at 1,014 millibars. We have a weak occlusion sitting just west of the Dixon entrance. A few areas of light rain and drizzle there behind that. A lot of drying for south central and southwestern Alaska with a ridge of high pressure sitting out over the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta. A wave of showers and a few thunderstorms working their way eastward this afternoon. And then there's much colder high pressure at 1,022 millibars, and that's what's creating that surge of colder air up across the northeastern Brooks Range this afternoon. Low pressure out across the central chain at 999 millibars there, and an occlusion working northward, colder air trying to march eastward, and that will end up in the Gulf there. Look for some showers out across the north and western Gulf as well as the North Pacific, and areas of fog, showers, and drizzle across the west coast and for most of the Bering, including St. Paul and St. George and the central Aleutians. High pressure is marching eastward, breaking up the clouds across south central, but it is moving eastward. That means it's slowly making room for what's coming in from the west, and colder air is dropping southward across the upper Yukon Valley as well as the eastern coastal plain of the North Slope there at 1,025 millibars. That's a decent amount of cold air and high pressure along with it. As that moves eastward, showers will continue tracking into parts of Yukon and maybe Tok. Showers and thunderstorms possible tomorrow afternoon in that area. Behind that, though, things are fairly dry from Ambler to Kobuk and southward toward Bristol Bay and Lake Iliamna, all the way down toward Port Heiden and Sarichef. Looks like many areas out toward the west, though, will start to fill in with clouds fairly quickly as this trough of low pressure is working from the Pribilovs and slowly creeping eastward. We're going to see this again on Thursday. Watch for areas of fog and drizzle and some light rainfall there. And for southeast, you may get stuck under some clouds throughout the day, maybe some hit and miss sunshine there, but a better chance for showers down around the Dixon entrance and around Haida Gwaii there and into part of British Columbia. It looks like the majority of southeast will generally be fairly stable, probably low clouds, but again, not horribly wet. So we get into Thursday, more of the same there for southeast. Showers around the Dixon entrance, Ketchikan out toward Craig and Klawak, a little bit further west, some drying, but you'll notice that's filling in as that wave out across the Gulf is sliding eastward. And then as we look out across the west coast of Alaska, showers and even a few thunderstorms could develop there. Notice all that drier air has shifted off to the east around the Alcan border and up north. Conditions have warmed up there substantially from what we'll see today here on the temperature charts, but out across the west coast, a much better chance for unsettled weather to affect some of our southwest villages, the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound region, as well as the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. And then along the western Alaska range and even north a bit up toward Denali, Lake Minchumina, a chance for some showers and thunderstorms in that area, and that'll probably progress eastward again as we get into Thursday. So here's a look at the temps today. 50s and 60s across a large part of southeast, 60 around Haines today, close to that around Juneau, 56 for Sitka, mid to upper 50s for a large part of southeast. A fairly mild day considering the clouds that some of you had. Upper 60s and low 70s around Prince William Sound to Seward at 72, 67 in Kenai, just shy of 60 in Homer around 3 o'clock, 68 in Anchorage, 72 around Talkeetna, and it looks like areas further north around Healy and Fort Greely are in the 50s and 60s. Fort Greely, though, clearly one of the warmer spots in the region at 62, 66 in Eagle, 67 in Tok. Looking northward, 59 around Fort Yukon, 52 in Arctic Village, and then much colder air around Anaktuvuk Pass and northward. You can see temperatures this afternoon only in the 30s and 40s, so cold enough at elevation for snow to fall there. If you've got some interesting snow reports, make sure you report that to the National Weather Service office in Fairbanks. You can do that on Twitter. It's really easy. Just say, hey, I'm in Arctic Village and I got 2 inches of snow, and then use that hashtag AKwx and tag NWS Fairbanks. It's an easy way to report that. 40s and 50s for Kotzebue Sound region, 43 around Nome, 61 around St. Lawrence Island. The Unalakleet region saw temps close to 50 degrees, a little bit milder as you got into the interior there. 58 around Galena, 63 in McGrath today, 64 in Bethel. Southwest saw temps in the mid to upper 60s for King Salmon and Dillingham, Lake Iliamna close to 70. 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, 47 in St. Paul, St. George warmer at 50 degrees, and 48 for Adak. Their friends a little bit further down the coast at 52, Shemya at 46. Overnight low temps in the upper 40s and lower 50s around the west coast and Bristol Bay, 53 in Kodiak southeast, looking at overnight lows in the upper 40s to about 50 degrees. On the North Slope, lows in the lower to mid 30s overnight there. In the interior, looking at lows closer to 50 degrees. Highs tomorrow back in the upper 60s and lower 70s, still fairly mild in southwest, and Galena at 71. Looking at Tanana close to 72, about the same there in Bettles tomorrow. 48 in in Barrow and Kaktovik and southward. You can still see that wedge of colder air. It's pretty small compared to all the heat we see across southwest Alaska, but this is moving south and east. So once that clears your region as we get into Thursday, conditions should warm up fairly rapidly, but Kaktovik could be considerably colder than some surrounding and neighboring Arctic villages tomorrow. Mid-40s for the central Aleutians, 50 in Shemya. Southeast again fairly mild in the mid-60s to about 70 degrees or better around Haines and Skagway tomorrow. On to flying weather. The North Slope will see MVFR conditions in the morning around Kaktovik southeast. Looking at hit and miss MVFR mainly for the central and southern panhandle. And out across the Bering as well as the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula and just outside of Icy Cape. Look for areas of IFR in the central chain and the Pacific coast for the Alaska Peninsula, as well as parts of Bristol Bay. But by the afternoon, a lot of that will improve. Watch for continued IFR for St. Paul, St. George, as well as the western end of Nunivak Island, St. Matthew, as well as St. Lawrence Island. And the North Slope should see considerable improvements there with IFR conditions south and west of AKwx all the way out towards Sand Point. And again, watch for showers and thunderstorms to develop across the eastern interior. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions there. Considerable changes, though, across the north and eastern North Slope as you get into the daytime tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass at VFR. Rainy Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule throughout the day. A start at MVFR for Windy Pass tomorrow. Isabel Pass, expect MVFR to start with improvements throughout the day, and then VFR from Antasta. Tanita Pass, expected to be VFR. Same goes for Portage Pass, and Chilkoot and White Pass look pretty good pretty much all day long. Freezing levels show that cold air wedge dropping southward quickly. Levels as low as 2, even 4,000 feet. They're north of the Brooks Range summits, mainly in the northeast, and then you can see that warm air surging backward across the west coast. Levels down to 6,000 to 8,000 feet across central and southern parts of southeast, but the warm air will eventually win this weather pattern later on this week. The icing potential, of course, we're watching for thunderstorms across the Alcan border. Below 4,000 feet, though, from Cape Sarachef, Pilot Point, Port Hayden, all the way down the coast, down to Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, Nikolsky. Below 4,000 feet means probably light to isolated moderate for the region. That's the greatest focus tomorrow. The jet stream has that trough of low pressure across the Bering, and most of the active weather is following that. You can see our little dip here across the north and eastern Arctic coast. That's what's inspiring that draw of colder air to drop southward. But really, a considerable amount of western Alaska is under the control of that southerly flow. Wind speeds there around 50 to 55 knots, and then we get back into our second trough across the eastern Gulf. Wind speeds there around 80 to 95 knots. At 3,000 feet, our southwesterly flow is working up the west coast at about 30 to 45 knots. Some of the stronger winds right over King Salmon and Dillingham. Our ridge of high pressure is working into the western Gulf with winds around 15 to 30 knots there, and winds are fairly light across the interior. And a southwesterly flow is found across the Arctic Ocean with northwesterlies across the central and western Bering Sea. At 3,000 feet, our ridge of high pressure is a little bit stronger here. You can see 20 to about 30 knots or so across west and southwestern Alaska. Still looking at southwesterlies across north and western Alaska, 20 to 35 knots, and northwesterlies across the eastern Gulf from 15 to 30. The interior wind speeds around 10 to 15. And then turbulence, of course, watching for areas below about 4,000 feet for the central and eastern Aleutians, as well as parts of the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. We're watching for an opportunity for a few thunderstorms across the Alcan border, but by and large, again, very limited areas of turbulence are expected tomorrow. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather and an update on the sea ice edge here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Alaska needs to wake up. They really need to wake up. Population is increasing in the state of Alaska.
The mindset of Alaskans has to change, that they are in a dangerous area.
The majority of our fires here and probably in the lower portion of the south central portion of Alaska are human-caused fires.
Our problem with children and fire escalates in the spring, summer, and fall.
All the aerial bombers, all of the helicopters, all the firefighters that there are that we have in the United States and the world cannot get in front of something like that because it's generating too much power.
In this part of the state right now in south central Alaska, we've got lots of standing dead spruce trees from the spruce beetle.
Black spruce are a very flammable type of tree, even when fully green.
Our weather's really changed. We have an earlier fire season now. The Arctic starts spring 8 days earlier now than it did a decade ago. That's significant.
No, last several winters over the Kenai Peninsula particularly, the snowpack has been lower than people who have been living there for 30 years ever remember.
They build their houses right in among the trees because of the beauty, the remoteness, and all of those nice Alaskan things we like to think about. Yet, when they have a fire, then that is the exact recipe for having a catastrophic fire.
As Alaskans are very familiar with fire, we heat our homes with it. We camp out. We go fishing. We use fire all the time. So we have to be fire safe. You have to be fire smart.
This is a major issue that we all have to deal with. And you'll notice that many, many agencies are involved here today.
And I think that we really have to look at that here in Alaska. What are the things that we can do prior to the event?
Resources that we can put toward them up front are far, far, far cheaper than it is to have it happen after the fact.
I mean, it's not a short-term solution that you're looking for a long-term solution because you have a long-term problem.
Being the Lone Ranger out there isn't going to work anymore. It's just going to make everything harder.
Somebody next door to you or real close by that doesn't, and it wipes you out. There's got to be that involvement with the community.
And that kind of planning works not just for fires, but any kind of disaster, because we could have a major earthquake. Roads could get cut off, structures could collapse. You might be counting on transportation, but if your garage collapses around your transportation, you might have to rely on your neighborhood.
They may not like their neighbors, they may not like their local government, but they have to interact so they can save both their lives and their property.
Fire prevention really is something that everybody needs to share in.
We don't sell fireworks in this area. They used to sell them right outside this door, across the street. But that stopped about 5 or 6 years ago, and so fireworks and also the community here is really tight, and they pull together as far as fire prevention.
We are a highly trained group of individuals. We're very tight within the community. We're there to back each other up continually.
Is get together as a subdivision, a little mini community, talk to the local planning commission, get that secondary access put in.
Panicked people trying to rush down roads that are heavily socked in with smoke, and visibility is down to 100 feet or less.
Those are the guys who are going to have to drive that truck down that one-way road. Those are the people that know their communities. So you need to get involved with your local fire department, volunteer or otherwise.
Whether it be involved in fire prevention programs, community education, helping at the station.
Our equipment up to status, that we keep our training up to status. It's very important.
And they really have one interest in mind, and that is to help you help yourself.
They can also participate in community land use practices, in developing those practices and making them unique to their own community.
community.
Your community council meetings, bring this up as an agenda item and do a little bit of pre-planning and a little bit of pre-thinking about these.
Local government agencies and especially their legislators.
We hope that our community and our local governments and state governments recognize that fact. Resources are very limited. It's really tough in some situations to make things come together.
But it still comes back to that community making a decision. Is this what's acceptable to us? And when it's not, then that community is the one that needs to work at changing that.
When in the springtime of the year, when the trees are crowned with leaves, when the ash and oak and the birch and yew are dressed in ribbons fair, when I was called the breathless moon in the blue veil of the night, the shadows of the trees appear amidst the lantern lights. We've been running all the night in some time of this day, not returning back again. We bring a garland gay. Who would go down to the shady groves and summon the shadows there, and tie a ribbon on those sheltering arms in the springtime of the year? The songs of the birds seem to fill the wood, that when the fiddler plays.
Here's a look at the sea ice edge and a word of caution from our Alaska Sea Ice Program analysts that all of the ice along the shore, despite how close it may be, is very unstable and shifting around, especially between Barrow and Wainwright right now. So, as always, with the Sea Ice Outlook that is now out, updated through the next 3 months, be sure and check that out online at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Consider that checking the daily ice forecast is becoming more and more critical as we go into the season's minimum there, as a lot of changes are expected to occur on a very daily basis this time of the year. As we look at southeast for the winds and the waves, notice southerlies coming through the inner channels around 15 knots with a 3-foot sea in many areas, and northwesterlies along the outer coast at 15 to 20. 4 to 5-foot seas are expected there for Wednesday. As we get into Thursday, a little bit more of an onshore push at 15 to 20 knots. Most areas are expected to see 4 to 5 feet across the outer coast. A little bit more of a southerly flow coming in from Stevens Passage northward toward the Lynn Canal. 3 to 5-foot seas there up north, 25 knots in the north with winds closer to 15 knots the further south you go toward Clarence Strait with a 3-foot sea there on Thursday. Across south central, northwesterly should be fairly light coming out of Prince William Sound. A nice day in the Sound, in fact, with 2-foot seas there. Light and variable winds in the Cook Inlet. Look for regions around Calgon Island southward to see a light northerly flow. But once you get into the Barren Islands and west, you're going to get into a stronger south and westerly wind with 4 to as high as 6-foot seas in Shelikof Strait. Westerlies east of the Barrens and southwesterlies around Marmot Island and south towards Sitkinak. For Thursday, a broader southerly flow works up Cook Inlet, 10 to 20 knots expected there with 3, 4, even 5-foot seas, maybe even 6-foot seas actually west of the Barrens. 7-foot seas in Shelikof Strait. Winds stay light but turn easterly in Prince William Sound, and south and southeasterlies coming into Resurrection Bay and the eastern Barrens at around 15 knots with 5 to 6-foot seas there. For the Alaska Peninsula and inside Bristol Bay, southerlies are light with small seas. Southerlies a little bit further down the coast are stronger though, 25 knots with a 6-foot sea. Southwesterlies along the Pacific coast, 25 to 30 knots with a 6 to 10-foot sea, becoming westerly on Thursday, 20 to 30 knots there. Southwesterlies come up a little bit more in Bristol Bay at 10 knots with an 8-foot sea, and 9-foot seas down the Bering Sea coast, 25 knots with a 9-foot sea there through Thursday, and that extends into the eastern Aleutians with a 10-foot sea on Wednesday. That's where it's coming from. Southwesterlies blowing over the central and eastern chain with 13 to as high as 15-foot seas across the central chain's Pacific coast. Northwesterlies behind that from Kiska to Attu at 25 knots with 9 to 10-foot seas there on Wednesday, becoming 6 to 8-foot seas on Thursday. And those westerlies blow all the way through the central and eastern chain for Thursday afternoon, 25 to as high as 30 knots there. Most areas looking at about 8 to 10 foot seas there for Thursday afternoon. Now for the west coast, an easterly flow is blowing offshore of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, about 15 to 20, 4 to 5 foot seas across the northern Bering, 6 foot seas as you get out toward St. Matthew, and southerlies across the Kuskokwim Delta out toward the Pribilofs at about 20 to 25, 4 to 10 foot seas there around the Pribilofs. They're the highest, again, west of the Pribilof Islands. For Thursday, southerlies continue working up the west coast, fairly light, 10 to 15, and look for a westerly shift around St. Matthew with 7 foot seas, and westerlies up to 20 around St. Paul and St. George with an 8 foot sea there on Thursday. For Wednesday, across the North Slope, look for northerlies to remain light from Prudhoe Bay eastward, and you'll pick up some more open water there and a 4 foot sea around Kaktovik. It's going to be cold. South and easterlies blowing off the Chukchi seacoast, 4 to 6 foot seas, 5 foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. And again, that's from a south and southeasterly direction at about 15 to 20. Winds will go a little light there on Thursday, about 10 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas. And east and southeasterly winds working through the Beaufort seacoast at about 15 to 25. Look for 6 foot seas across the eastern Beaufort seacoast there on Thursday afternoon. And that should do it for your coastal waters forecast. For tonight then, a broad surge of cooler air is working southward across the northeastern slopes of the Brooks Range and below 4,000 feet. Let's see if I can get this one right. You could have as much as 1 inch of snow. Above that, though, it could be as much as 5. So certainly cold enough air working on the eastern side of that high pressure system dropping southward, and that'll inspire a chance for showers and maybe even a few thunderstorms there working along the Alcan border. Most of that's going to stay east with a ridge of high pressure across the west, and unsettled weather through the Bering should start to creep into the west coast as we head into Thursday. That's your Alaska weather, and thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
From her rich and fertile valleys to the shores of her icy seas, from her fields and farms and shellfish beds and her many nurseries, for the finest of her flavor, for the freshest by far, choose the things Alaskans bring to the market where you are. Products that we're proud to call our own, and it's all Alaska grown.